This is Douglas P. from the group Death in June, and you're listening to 3D Radio on 93.7 FM. Groovy, baby.
I do crave to bathe myself until the grave. In the love of life, I do crave to bathe myself until the grave. Let the wind catch a rainbow on fire. That's the wind. Let the wind catch a rainbow on fire. Let the wind catch a rainbow on fire. Lost in wind. Let the wind catch a rainbow on fire. On fire. Let the wind catch a rainbow on fire. On fire. On fire. On fire. Fire.
Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Hour of the Apocalypse Yuletide Special. For its first part tonight, an interview with Douglas P. from Death in June. Working on, because you're talking about working on a new album, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm working on an album which is called The Rule of Thirds. I sort of set out last October, October 2006, so I was beginning to sit down and put together a lot of the writings I've been working on for several years, because I'm always in a perpetual state of flux with words and music. And it really began to take shape then. I took off for a week to Melbourne, which is about an hour's flight from where I live, and locked myself in a hotel and made the beginning, and now it's getting recorded. And in fact, today I was sort of scrambling around amongst various bits and pieces, working out how the album should actually start. There are 13 tracks so far, but I've got all the main facets of it recorded, so it's now where to take it, because it's already created its own sort of feeling, which is different to anything else I've done before, which is interesting. And so I don't want to ruin it. It's sort of our delicate stage at present.
Does it differ quite a lot from your previous effort, All Pigs Must Die?
In feeling it does, and in subject matter, but it's like any album that I've worked on from the very first days of Death in June to now. Everything always appears to be different, and this one has only been listened to by 3 other people here, the sound engineer and my partner and our best friend. And recently I actually sent out a few copies to some very close friends elsewhere in the world to say, look, what do you think is going on here? Because I'm happy, but I'm nonplussed. And basically I think that tends to be the reaction from everybody else too. So far so good. I'm happily pleased with its puzzlement.
Yeah, I mean, because it's been I'm glad to hear that you're still working on music, because most people have heard by now that you're planning not to play live again. What was the reason behind that?
Well, that was in 2005. I did the last tour. I mean, the past few years have been more and more intense in terms of playing live everywhere in the world, and it just hit me that it was a good time to stop. It was strange that Death in June started out as being a group that wouldn't concentrate in the live arena, and would prefer to kind of concentrate his efforts in the studio. But in retrospect, that was probably detrimental to us, because we were such an extraordinary band live, especially in the original 3-piece, and continued to be after. But it was gaining more and more momentum as I went on year after year, that I was spending 3 or 4 months abroad touring, and it seemed the right time to stop, because I was getting older. It was detracting from all the other things I had to do with Death in June, such as write a new album. And there's a million and one other things to be done with the group too, from literature right through to DVDs and acting. It was an easy bad thing to decide to do, I suppose, in many other people's eyes, because they want to see Death in June continue performing live. But I thought it was time to stop.
One of the things that's interesting about your live performances is almost, some people have said that like performance art almost, isn't it? Because you do sort of dress up and often disguise yourself in masks and occasionally mops. I just wonder.
That's a sort of an ongoing in-joke. It's not a mop.
Oh, right.
That was another one of these sort of urban myths that gained momentum from New Zealand, of all places.
Right.
Courtesy of a friend and a promoter out there. It's actually not a mop at all. It's a sniper's veil that I wear on stage. But I suppose I can see that at certain angles it does look like Cousin It from the Monsters or the Advert family.
That's the thing. I mean, is it all part and parcel of, is this kind of performance on stage all part and parcel of the humour that Death in June has, or is there a deeper message for that?
I mean, I don't know if it was performance art or is performance art. I wouldn't go to sort of describe it in any other way that when we did start out. I remember Tony and I had been in crisis, so we came from we came from the punk era, and so was Patrick. Patrick had been in the Runners from '84, and we had a certain contempt for the music business. and didn't like all the usual things that are associated with being a group in the music business, although inevitably you have to kind of dip your toes into that world if you're going to exist in it, and that's what we wanted to do. So we had problems with how to present ourselves in a field that we didn't actually like being in, and in fact Patrick refused to take part in early photo sessions. So the first photo sessions that were done on the group only featured Tony and myself, because Patrick Ligas thought it was unnecessary. The group should project itself on its music alone. But as we started doing shows, then inevitably people would take photographs, journalists and members of the audience, and they started to appear in press, fanzines, etc. And then we thought, well, what do we do about that? And in fact, some of the shows that followed after that was that we basically played with our back to the audience and strobe lights facing into the crowd.
That's right. So it's kind of creating an anonymity on stage, is it?
Yeah, and it's just we didn't want to do the usual thing, and then of course that developed into the NADA photo shoot where we were literally on the cover with our backs to the camera. But before that, we had then progressed to putting camouflage netting up on stage, and in fact we were using masks fairly soon and dressed in Royal Air Force snow camouflage, and projected films and slideshows onto us, so it went through the netting and onto us, and because we were in white, the films and the slideshows would play off us, our bodies, and so it was another way of confusing the audience, or disrupting their expectations, or just once again stepping outside of being in the same arena as Haircut 100 or Duran Duran.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the reason why I bring up performance art, actually, because I don't know any other band. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We never saw it as sort of being like that, though, because I understand what you mean, but it was more like fuck off art.
Yeah, exactly. So, but with the live things no more, does that mean you're probably not going to be working with John Murphy anymore?
Almost certainly, yeah, because I had 9 years with John Murphy as the live percussionist for Death in June, the percussionist, and a really good old soldier would turn up at the airports and be wherever he had to be in the world, and it was good working with him. An interesting career, and it was just an odd meeting that we did have in Sydney some years ago. It would have been about 11, 12 years ago, by chance, because I hadn't seen him for about 11 years then. I mean, the last time I knew John Murphy was in the early 80s, and the only thing I'd said to him was coming down the steps of the Clarendon Hotel in Hammersmith, which doesn't exist anymore, where we were playing. I think it was the night Death in June. We're being supported by what was to become Current 93, but I think they played as Dog's Blood Order that night, and it was David Tibet, John Murphy, and whoever else was on stage. And I was carrying this huge timpani drum down these steps, barely managing it, and John was sort of in front of me, and he had to sort of like jump out the way as I skedaddled down the steps before I dropped the whole thing and crashed. I said, do you need any help? And that was in 1983, I think, or 84, and then about 11 years later, I was seeing a show in Sydney in Australia where I hadn't yet moved to, but I was coming in and out of quite a lot, and then I heard this Hugh Douglas P behind me. I said, "Oh, John, hello." So I knew him immediately because he was a bit of a figure then around, and had struck a chord. I remember very well when he was performing with SPK on the Tube, which is now a defunct program that used to be shown on, I think, Friday nights on Channel 4, and he was the real industrial drummers that I saw, where he was using an axe grinder on a steel drum and causing sparks everywhere.
gentle major.
I didn't set out to create a genre. I think no one does. It just happens. And but obviously, after a period of time where there are certain words like neo-folk or apocalyptic folk or post-industrial folk or whatever are bandied around, and the finger keeps being pointed back at me, then I guess I have to accept responsibility at some stage, right? Or part responsibility, because
that's right.
As I've always maintained. I mean, a lot of people say that they think neo-folk started with what ends when the cymbals shatter in 1992, but I tend to think it started earlier with Brown Book by Death in June and Swastikas for Noddy by Current 93, which were being written at the same time in the same place when we lived together in North London in Tufnell Park in 1986. And Brown Book came out the next year, and shortly followed by Swastikas for Noddy, which I pretty much wrote most of the music to. And I think that was the beginning of what people coin.
That's right, yeah, because Current 93 are often coined as starting it as well, sort of a joint starter, and maybe Tony Wakeford was kind of lumped under that first.
Yeah, Tony came later, because he'd sort of disappeared off the scene, and then I had a phone call from Tony one day and saying, what kind of brand is your guitar, because he liked the sound of it and blah blah blah, and I told him it was a Washburn, and I think that's when he went out and bought some, and then sort of Sol Invictus came into being a bit later on, which always surprised me, because I think Tony was, and he is, if he picked it up again, one of the best bass players in the world.
I think that the name does suit some of the groups, especially yourself and possibly Current 93, because it's the name in itself is quite humorous, isn't it? And humour does.
Which one's that?
Neo and apocalyptic folk, because they're quite. Those words are quite humorous, and I think a lot of Death in June does play on humour.
As far as I remember, it was Tibet and I were playing some shows in Germany at Christmas 1992, and we went out shopping in Hamburg, and I think it was we saw that we went to a record shop called WOM, World of Music, which stocked our stuff then, and we saw our material underneath this sort of name in the racks, in the record and CD racks, and I think it was either post-industrial or neo-folk, one of the two, and that was the first time I ever saw it. And I think Tibet had sort of almost joked about it beforehand, but someone somewhere had actually thought about it too, and it had become a way that a record shops could describe whatever we were doing so they could sell it. Because before then, I think what Death in June was doing, Colour 93 and whoever else, was fairly indefinable.
Yeah, so it was marketing thing, really.
Yeah, I think that's where it came about.
But yeah.
That it came out of whoever runs the record shops. So, how do we describe it?
But talking about Death in June's inception, or start rather, where did the name kind of inspire from? Because it's quite an atmospheric sounding name, Death in June. Many have said it was a take on the film Death in Venice. Is that correct in any way? Or not?
It was literally a chance event. We were already recording what was to become our first single, the 12-inch Heaven Street EP, at Alaska Studios at Waterloo, and I can still see it now, the studio where we were sitting, Tony, Patrick and myself, and I'm hard of hearing in my right ear, which has got worse over the period of time too, which is probably courtesy of live work. And Patrick said something, and I was sure he said Death in June. I just repeated it. I said Death in June, and then we all stopped and stared at each other. I said, no, that's the name. That's going to be the name of the group.
I see. So
the first thing we thought of was, in fact, Patrick's father had died in June, and he'd discovered him when he'd gone upstairs into the bedroom and found him dead in bed. And that was the first thing we thought of. Then we started having our own personal and more sort of historical relevances. And we each sort of pitched in with what it could mean. So everything has been sort of post-rationalised since, that it means this, that or the other. Well, I think it's been one of the big bonuses of the name Death in June, because it can mean everything and anything and nothing. And it's such an odd thing. I had doubts about it a few years later, and was going to drop it, especially at the time when I was thinking I was writing the last album in 1988-89 called The War of Sacrifice. Remember, it was Michael Cashmore, who I met, I think, shortly after, who went on to be the guitarist in Current 93, was saying to me, no, it's the perfect name. You don't change it, keep it as is. It was him that sort of, I remember, convincing me, and I thought, no, if I step outside of being personally attached to it and view it as an outsider, yes, I can see.
So it's nothing to do with that film then, Death in Venice? Because I think people...
But it can be if you want it to be. Unfortunately, my mascara doesn't melt in the sun. I'm wearing it on the beach.
Well, no, because that's right, because you're quite a fan of Dirk Berggard, aren't you, from his stuff? Wasn't he also in that film, the Night Porter? The
Night Porter and The Damned, which are
right.
Both films that I really appreciate and liked, and definitely have Death in June connotations.
Time has a numbing effect. I weep and I have wept to become more muted, to become more blank. The fear of life seeps from
value as slaves.
Also, one of the themes that crop up are the three symbols that you use on the albums and on sort of throws at your gigs, which is the death's head, the whip, and the rune sign as well. Are they inspired by any particular?
Which rune sign? The life rune or my bind rune?
The life rune. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I was just wondering the inspiration behind that.
Yeah. Well, the first symbol that we were using was the life rune. Tony had bought some and gave them to us when the group started, symbolically being correct, of course. It's the birth of Death in June. And I continue to wear a rune to this very day, that type of rune. So that's where that came into being. The Totenkopf 6, the Death's Head 6, was a simple sort of combination of combining death in June, the 6th month. And it should have been on, the first time it was used was on the second single, State Laughter, Holy Water. And for some reason, because it was in the days when you did artwork with letraset and it was very primitive in comparison to the sort of computer stuff that we do today. The 6 had fallen off when it went to the printers, and it didn't appear on the first 7-inch we did, which was our second release. And there were a lot of problems with that release because they glued the 7-inch cardboard sleeve together with some glue that didn't set properly, so when the records were put in, the actual records were glued to the inside of the sleeve, so a quarter of the pressing were ruined.
Yeah.
So I was determined to get that symbol right sooner or later, because I saw the 6 not being there was bad luck and blah 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 blah. But that's how that came into being. So that would be about 1982. It wasn't there at the start, but it soon was. And the Whip Hand 6 really came about because I knew I'd known a friend from about the age of 19. I'd first met him. So I'd known him for several years, who was involved in very heavy S&M gay sex. But he was a high-up Quaker and had been a conscientious objector during the Second World War, had been put in prison because he refused to fight, and had some strange epiphany whilst in prison, which is where I think that some of this sadomasochism had come from. And he designed this whip hand to be the badge of this exclusive S&M club, which was going to be based in Dorking in Surrey. And we fell out of contact with each other because he'd had some religious experience in Easter 1975 or 6 when he knew me, and he said that God had told him I shouldn't be a friend of his. By chance, years later, in the mid-80s, so this would be about 83 or 4, our paths crossed again, and once we got to know each other again, there's this sign that was hanging around that the club that he wanted to get together hadn't come into fruition in the way that he wanted it to, and I really liked the symbol of the thing, and I liked the whole kind of idea of having the whip hand, and I just added a 6, another letraset 6 in there, and made sure it didn't fall off, and that was that's where that came into being. It was first used for NADA in 1985 when that was released, and has been used on and off since. It was just representing another side of A Death in June, the control aspect of it, because we're very much always been interested in trying to control exactly where we were going, and when it boiled down to just being me being the only member of Death in June, which was at that time, it became even more relevant. I mean, Patrick left shortly after the release of Nada in 1985.
So it all started with the Rune sign, and that was the first symbol you used.
Yeah, the life rune was actually the first symbol that we used. We used to wear it on our ties and collars. That was the first one.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's set a kind of trend where so many so-called neo-folk bands are now all covering their albums with all sorts of runes almost, I think.
Well, I think that way, because if it leads to something genuine, because all of us, certainly Tony and myself were, and Patrick, I think, were involved in the runes as a source of information and a religious aspect of our characters. I certainly see Death in June as part of the resurrection of Eurocentric culture.
Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of flies, rose clouds of bitter lies. When the angels of ignorance fall down from your eyes. Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of lies. Rose clouds of twilight truth, rose clouds of night. Rose clouds of harvested love all alight. When the ashes of life fall down from the skies. Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of lies. And festivals end as festivals must. From the hooded crows of Rome to the falcons of Zagreb, mother victim of Jesus, lie down in Sydney's dust. For festivals end as festivals must. Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of flies. Rose clouds of bitter lies. When the angels of ignorance fall down from our eyes. Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of lies. 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 Rose clouds of Holocaust, rose clouds of lies.
Two of the godfathers of apocalyptic folk and industrial music, Death in June and Non, featuring Boyd Rice, bring their own very special blend of melodies, martinis and misanthropy to Adelaide for the very first time. Appearing at the Enigma Bar, Hindley Street, on Wednesday the 23rd of April, they will be ably supported by SA's main exponent of dark, ambient soundscapes, Isomer. Doors open at 8 p.m, tickets are $20. Thanks to 3D Radio.
So I respect the ambiguity of Death in June. So I mean, it has a clear sort of German World War II imagery, And
not necessarily always. I mean, a lot of people that get mixed up with... I've used imagery from all around the world, and people say, oh, that's that, and that's so-and-so, and I say, oh, that's actually in a park in Paris, and it's representing the Third Republic, or that's outside a art museum in Sydney, Australia, or that's in Rome.
But definitely, maybe not...
There's a expectation.
Yes. And
it's not necessarily the reality.
No, I think though there's definitely a militaristic imagery, isn't there, with obviously the camouflage and stuff like that. But that's
also part and parcel of our sort of rejecting the rather boring, sordid music business, where people pose on their record companies covers with a cigarette in their mouth, or it's that kind of who cares? Who gives a fuck? I don't really care about stuff like that.
Exactly.
I prefer to be kind of like pissing in their face, really, and so it's the best way of doing that,
That's one way of doing it, yeah. And
and it proved actually successful, because if anyone had told me 25 years ago that you're going to be this group that plays acoustic guitars and you're going to dress like Nazis and you're going to show fucking mouth, and but yeah, of course we are. Yeah, thanks for the good advice. And now we continue.
And I think there's, as we mentioned briefly earlier, there's been sort of, I won't go into this in too much detail, because you've had it all your life, certain accusations of Nazism, but your beliefs have never actually been set in stone or talked about. But do you think there is an unconscious Nazi propaganda element in Death in June?
Well, I'm just pleased my work's taken seriously enough to think that it can unconsciously influence people. And I think, when people start worrying about some political party that died a death in Berlin in 1945, and when there are other real problems such as Islamic fundamentalism or the increase in state powers these days, then I think they've really got their concerns all screwed up.
Do you think it's in some ways dangerous, though?
It's down to them. I mean, I think I've never really felt attracted to any kind of art that is safe and acceptable. So if it's considered dangerous, then that's great. But I don't set out to think, what kind of dangerous song am I writing today? It doesn't work like that. You have to obey your instincts. You have to do what you think is going to be right for you. And then how it comes out and how it's perceived is down to other people. It's not straightforward at all. It's not straightforward for me. Why should it be straightforward for other people?
So your beliefs don't side towards the right wing then at all?
I think left wing, right wing, up, down, it's not sort of relevant to the situation. June is Death in June, and you take what you want from it or what you don't want from it.
Yeah,
I think perhaps we're living in a time now where those kind of descriptions verge on the redundant. I think the world has changed to such a degree that it is something else that we're looking for to describe things. At the end of the day, it's what they focus on. It's not what I've focused as far as I'm concerned.
Just talking, last thing I was going to say about the Third Reich, there's some historians that have often described there being an underground sort of homosexuality within the Third Reich, which something that the propaganda of the time helped to create. Is this something Death in June recognise, or is it one of your themes? Or
being a history student and interested in that period in time anyway, certainly there was a well-known homosexual influence in the brown shirts, the SA. This is all before the war, and really that all ended within a year of Hitler coming to power with the Night of the Long Knives. After that, there was always, I suppose, first of all, homosexuality became banned under the Nazis. But that just fell in line with other countries around the world. In America, it was punishable by death. That was even during the Second World War. So they were on the same line as any gays in concentration camps. In Britain, it was still imprisonable. It was imprisonable up until 1967. So they were just fitting in. I think up until Hitler came to power, there wasn't any specific anti-homosexual laws in Germany. So they were in a kind of a unique position there. There were definitely gays amongst the first of the members of the Nazi Party and other far-right parties, but it, certainly became very underground after. It wasn't. There were suspicions about Rudolf Hess and his relationship with Hitler and blah, 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 blah. But realistically, I think if you were known to be gay during those times after 1934, you ended up in a concentration camp. It's sort of more pre-Hitler rather than post-Hitler.
So you would say it was one of your themes, or something that Deaf and June recognised?
I was certainly interested in the whole kind of thing. I've made no bones about the fact that I was very curious about the beginnings of the Nazi movement. How couldn't you be? Because I saw the Second World War as being the very event that really shaped the world of the 20th century. So Hitler, because there's often been misquoted, I said, because they failed to kind of mention all the other things, that Hitler was one of the most important people of the 20th century because of that. But equally, Osama bin Laden is so far the most important person of the 21st century, because he's shaping everything that has gone on since 9/11.
Something got hold of me. Oh yes it did, I said. Something got hold of me. It rattled around my head. Something got hold of me. Oh yes it did, I said. Something got hold of me. It rattled around my head. I went to a meeting last night, but my heart wasn't right. I went to a meeting last night, but the soul wasn't right. Something got hold of me. Oh yes it did, I said. Something got hold of me. It rattled around my head. Early one morning, on the mourner's bench, my heart it was filled with misery. My heart it was filled with misery. My heart it was filled with misery. The same God that touched you one day, He laid His hands on me.
Many of your lyrics also touch on a tragic or dark romance, probably, well, clearly homosexual romance.
I've had that romance, yes, thank you very much.
Yes, and I mean, clearly it's on the homosexual side of romance, but like sort of Burroughs, you seem to touch on a kind of loneliness of homosexual love with lyrics on tracks like Despair, and Symbols of the Sun, maybe. What ends when the symbols shatter?
And I've found over the years that the actual interpretation that I had of my songs has changed. And that's what I used to sing and think of. Now, when I've sung those songs before, and I still sing them to myself to keep in with the guitar and stuff like that. think, oh, that line used to mean that to me, but now it means something else. So they've evolved with turn. And I don't think any of my songs can be perceived as specifically gay. It's only because of that I'm known as being gay that they can be. Otherwise, certain songs can be interpreted as being whatever, as regards male, female, or elephant.
But I think loneliness is a theme which is one of the more obvious ones. I think there seems to be a theme of loneliness and possibly nostalgic atmosphere in some of your lyrics.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And talking of nostalgic, there's almost a kind of yearning to have existed in the past. Like on Runes and Men, you talk about dreaming of greater times in past ages. Is that a sort of take on modernity or a disliking of modernity?
No, I mean, actually the person I was speaking to you about earlier, who I'd met when I was 18, 19, and very heavily involved in S&M sex, etc. and so on, and as I told you, he was and a Quaker. He was quite high up in the Quaker society in the UK. And one of the first things he said to me is that you're an old soul on young shoulders, and you've been here before. And it's something I've always felt at myself anyway, so I probably have lived in the past. There's no way of conclusively proving it, of course.
Do you think you might have been a German in 1933 then, or in the past?
It's a possibility, but who knows, I could have been a mouse.
Yeah, I see, yeah. That's
I'm
right.
actually getting up the scale of the ladder in life to do, what's it called, retrogressive hypnotism, or whatever it's called. To be regressed, I think it's called. But unfortunately, David Tibet did have that happen to him, and he didn't come out of it with very good news, and that's always stuck with me. I think I'm one of the few people he ever told about what he was supposed to have been, and I've kept that to myself, and will always keep that to myself. It was done by one of the people, Lionel Snell, who was living in the house that we lived in at the time in Tufnell Park, and everyone in this house, which there was about 10 different people lived there, were all involved in one way or another in the occult, and he was deemed one of the best in the country at doing this kind of thing. And but of course, I mean, we spoke about that. It could well be, Lionel's trying to freak Tibet out, that kind of thing, or saying to Tibet what Tibet wants to hear, and Tibet might well have wanted to hear bad news.
Pigs must die.
This ain't August 69.
All pigs must die.
7 seek house and nine.
Their trotters are in the mud.
They're better off with the Son of God.
They had no idea.
Not even close, not even near.
All pigs must die.
This ain't August 69.
All pigs must die.
7 seek house and nine.
Die.
This is August 99.
All pigs must die.
Their stolen riches are really mine.
Cover their faces in blood.
They're better off with the Son of God.
All pigs must die.
This is August 99.
All pigs must die.
The Lord of the Claw will make them mine.
two of the godfathers of apocalyptic folk and industrial music, Death in June and Non, featuring Boyd Rice, bring their own very special blend of melodies, martinis and misanthropy to Adelaide for the very first time. Appearing at the Enigma Bar, Hindley Street, on Wednesday the 23rd of April, they will be ably supported by SA's main exponent of dark ambient soundscapes, Isomer. Doors open at 8 p.m, tickets are $20. Thanks to 3D Radio.
I was going to talk about your direction into the folk music. I mean, do you feel that was kind of a way of heading into a more mature direction musically, or was it Tibet's influence, or was it a way of becoming more distinctive?
It wasn't Tibet's influence at all. I mean, the only thing I can say that he had in that evolvement was the fact he gave me a half-complete cassette of Love's Forever Changes.
Mm.
But at the same time, I'd already recorded some of Death in June's first album with acoustic guitar. We're Guilty of No Pride has got acoustic guitar on it, as well as acoustic bass, because Tony and I were, trying to kind of take some of the electric rock stuff out of the, the usual format. And I was a very keen admirer of spaghetti westerns and Ennio Morricone soundtracks, and it was really a combination of that, then building up to I bought the Manson Family Love and Terror album Lie. It was a bootleg LP. I think I got in rough trade in about 82 or 3. And I was listening to that a lot, and I was really amazed at how simple some of the songs were, but with all these great weird lyrics. And then when Tibet had given me shortly after this cassette of Love's Forever Changes, it was along similar lines but much more polished. And then my electric guitar was stolen from the rehearsal studios, and I had to get a replacement guitar very quickly because we were just about to do 3 dates in Scotland. And so I went to the usual guitar place. I bought things in Guildford and got this semi-acoustic replacement, which seemed okay for the moment because I wanted to sort of have the best of both worlds with electric and acoustic, but it didn't really provide that. In fact, I hated playing that guitar. So I did these shows in Scotland, and we came back and we did some more in the southeast, and we were recording Burial at the time, which was going to be the last album that Tony Wakeford was on, and I was really unhappy with that whole period. We were falling to bits. It was really nearly the end of the group, and that's why it was called Burial as well. And as soon as that was out of the way, I thought, no, I've got to get rid of this guitar. I'm going to go commit myself completely to an acoustic one. So I part-exchanged that and bought my first 6-string acoustic, which first proper 6-string acoustic. So it was really a kind of combination of events. It was listening to Charles Manson and Love, and having my electric guitar stolen, and that's why the acoustic came in. I mean, you're picking up new fans all the time, because there are people around today that run around even when we weren't even born when we started. It's a march, it's a perpetual march, and people drop by the wayside, and people then join in. And,
yeah. So
I think at the end of the day, to explain it fully, is that it has been so far anyway the quality of the art. I always knew Death in June was special, though.
And the last question, really, the rule of thirds, what inspired that name, or the title of the name?
Well, it's a photographic term I've been used to for many years, because I've taken most of the photographs that are used for Death in June covers and promotion, and etc. and so on, because I'm a very keen photographer, and if I hadn't become involved in music, this would be hopefully the other art I would have been concentrating on. But then I started thinking that there's more to that, the rule of thirds, than just that. I started thinking naturally of the Holy Trinity and the Satanic Trinity. The fact that I've lived in many houses, as I do now, which the number is 3.
Yeah, you know what people are going to be saying as well, don't you? They're going to say, oh, it's the third, it's a reference to the Third Reich.
That has actually crossed my mind, and I can think that's fine. I have a partner and perpetual lover, so we have a functioning threesome, and have had for years, 7+ years. So
that's good.
3 goes through my life, so even the Third Reich does, let's face it. So.
To the Hour of the Apocalypse Yuletide Special. Thanks a lot.
Possessed, love and worship and power and success, and love is perverted and destroyed and possessed.
Spend an intimate evening with the main exponents of neo-folk band Death in June. Join Death in June and their kinky lounge friends Novo Homo and Isomer for a night of post-industrial music at the Jade Monkey, Saturday the 19th of March. Tickets are $20. Doors open at 9 p.m. 3D sponsor.
Hey gringos, Adelaide's own Electro Instro de Diablos.
Let the blackbirds kiss me, my Rhine Atrocity. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me, my carcass beauty. Time lost is never regained. Time lost is never the same.
Dici che abbiamo combattuto e abbiamo.
Of pure heart, of pure hound, too few, too many. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me. Time lost is never regained. Time lost is never the same. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me. Let the blackbirds kiss me. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me. My Rhine Atrocity, something of the terror. It's in our blood, so let the stormflower flow. Nectar from above, I hold you in contempt, like a guilty dog. My Rhine barbarity, shrouded in secrecy. Time lost is never regained. Time lost is never the same. Let the blackbirds kiss me. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me. Let the blackbirds kiss me. My Rhine Atrocity. Oh, let the blackbirds kiss me. Let the blackbirds kiss me.